You mentioned the compressive force on the tendon being in these deep positions. So, all right, you go day one, you're getting into your slow heavy, you go deep squat. That patella is just pushing into that tendon and causing probably a flare up from being in that deep squat position. But you've also mentioned that like that full end range position probably isn't the best for the tendon itself. Can you explain why you would trend towards more mid-range stuff instead of full range stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I kind of separate them with, so you do get compression, and it's not to say compression's bad, because when you play basketball, you're compressing. Your patella is shoving forward, and your patella, it's getting compressed like mashed potatoes against the. But I guess they kind of argue that you might not get much compression at the patellar tendon, and it might depend on the anatomy of your patella itself, because some people kind of have a ridge at the bottom, and but you definitely get compression at the quad tendon with the condyles of the femur when you get into deep positions. They're just mashing against the and then with the Achilles, you get it calcaneus when you go into deep positions. So it's happening when you just walk around, you're getting some level of compression, but I think it's when you're like forcing the compression that's probably not good.
Especially early on in rehab.
Yeah. But yeah, so the deep positions, why I'm not a fan is when you're rehabbing a tendon, if you think of those cells, like a tendon cell is kind of lengthened out. Like you don't have many cells in your tendon, and the cells are what you got to get back online to rehab your tendon. You don't have many cells. They're kind of lengthened out along your tendon, and they have projections, like spider-like projections all over, because there's hardly any cells. They need to communicate with the whole tendon. So that's why they lengthen out. They're like you could imagine a spider having all these projections out of it. But one of the ideas when you have a tendinopathy is you have those pockets of degeneration. Those cells are no longer lengthened out. They're kind of rounded. So they're like fatter. And you would have to assume that pocket of degeneration is not loaded. It's not going to be loaded. It's kind of shielded. If it was loaded, it would be a long cell again, and it would have projections. So this is all to say, when you're rehabbing a tendon, you want to strain the tendon. You want to elongate the tendon. You don't want to elongate it too much, because then, like, if you're not ready for it, like if someone has a really bad patellar tendon, they go on a heaviest possible leg extension, you blow up the tendon again. Wasn't ready for that level of strain. So you just grade it, again, based off of pain, based off of maybe next day pain response. But if you get on, for example, a leg extension iso, and you hold and you're good at holding as much as you want, as much weight as you can, let's say that tendon is slack and then it goes to straight, but then you get a 10% change in elongation. So it elongates 10%. And you're tolerating that well. You have to assume that those cells are getting that signal that all the cells, we need to go in line of the force, and we need to lay down collagen in line of the force. You need to get a huge muscular pull to get that. So that's why mid-range, just do a mid-range, you feel a huge quad hit. You do a deep range, it's like, I don't know, quad, I feel like more joint. And then if you go too straight of a range, like a straight leg, and try to flex the quad, the tendon's already not in a position where it's going to elongate, because it's completely straight. So mid-range is a way for you to get a huge pull from the muscle, because the muscle is what's going to be straining and elongating the tendon. Mid-range is where you're getting a huge muscular hit, and that muscle's yanking on the tendon to get a big strain, and you're not getting that compression. But if you go too deep, you probably get some of that compression. You just don't feel the muscular hit, Like if you just went a leg extension as deep knee angle as you can, it feels weird, And then straight, again, you're not getting that starting elongation of the tendon. So when you go to something like an 8, like I'm a fan of split squats. Normal split squats, like we've been doing on hundreds of years, we don't need to change them. They're perfect.
Right.
When you do a normal split squat, you can load that as heavy as you possibly can and get a huge hit in your quadriceps, if that's what you're going for. Get a huge hit in your quadriceps, very little joint discomfort. Now, if you try to go as deep as possible, you're going to have to use a lighter weight. You might get some discomfort because of compression, but your muscle is not working as well to pull on the tendon. So I would have to assume you're not getting as much strain in the tendon either. So I think the mid-range is money, because you get a huge muscle pull and you get a good tendon elongation. And you can just grade that. Like you can just go, if you got to start light, then start light, but stay mid-range and then progress the weight over time. Because with the tendon, go back to the tendon, when you have a tendon pain, it shuts down the brain, and the brain is not good it shuts down the brain connection to the muscle is not good at pulling anymore. So if you get on a heavy leg extension and you try to go 100 pounds, and you would have to think like you're yanking on the tendon, even like too much, because the muscle can't take up for it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of why like mid range, because tendon health, when you have a tendinopathy, your tendon health is going to come back from getting that muscle to pull on it, getting that muscle back. And usually the best angles for muscle are that mid-range position. You can feel a huge muscle pull, and it's not going to piss off the tendon because you're not compressing the tendon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like normal leg extension, mid-range, split squat, mid-range, squats, kind of individual. Like some people can get super deep. Some people it does aggravate. You just go based off of pain. It can be individual, because some people need to go deep to catch a clean. Or they need to go deep because I've had Olympic lifters get jumpers knee.
Yep.
And they need to get into those positions where they do compress. But it's like, let's take away the compression for a bit, work mid-range, develop the quad again, give the tendon a little bit of a break. And I think the time aspect is just like, let's take away the pain-provoking thing.
Yeah.
And let the tendon go about its healing process.
Exactly.
So yeah, I love mid-range. It just works better.
Yeah. So go back to your normal split squats, maybe your rear foot elevated, but the ATG, like I think the ATG split squats is stretch. It's just like if you want to take your joints through a full range of motion, do it. I take all of my joints through a full range of motion, but I don't need to load it really heavy. Like that's not my primary strength. I would go mid-range for strength, especially if I'm looking at tendon health. I do think it's good for joints to still go through a full range, but I think you can go heel elevated bodyweight squat or like goblet squats, and like that is what I consider stretching for me. So I might do that in my warm up, or I might do that in my cool down. And I think it's just generally good for your joints to go through a full range of motion. But that type of stuff has never felt really good for me if I try to load it really heavy. It just, especially not with the tendon.
Yeah. Yeah. I've even had it like patellofemoral, and sometimes I get like fluid effusion in the knee from playing too much or whatever it is. And that definitely doesn't feel good to get in those deep positions. But it's like placebo, people believing in something, and some people are so excited about doing it. So I'm like, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
It's just that, you know what, if you keep doing it and it doesn't work, like here's a method that I use that I put a lot of thought into, and it's really hard to refute my way. If you're saying that split squat is amazing for patellar tendon, it's very easy for me to refute that.
Yeah.
But someone come and refute me, and they'll be like, I got all the cards for me, and it's just
right.
like you got nothing to say. And I guess, but go back to the time thing. If you're doing that, you're giving yourself a break from basketball, a break from things, and then you're like, that was the game changer. I'm like, probably just you gave it a little break, and you did a little bit of movement you might have not done. Mm-hmm. And if it worked for you, good. You never need to come to us for jumpers knee advice, because you got heels. You can go play.
Right.
Leave us alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's also a thing with that. I don't like talking about this because I don't want to ruin anybody's placebo. Like if they believe that the ATG split squat is what's gluing their body together and keeping them alive, like I don't want to ruin that. But at the same time, like you'll see the testimonials for it. You'll see so many testimonials like, it helped me so much. But when I talk to people in real life, like, oh, you did that. How do you feel? And they're like, I'm back to regular training. Like didn't feel great. But there's not a place for that on the internet. You don't see the negative testimonials.
No, yeah.
So it's like survivorship bias. Like you see what worked or the people it worked for, and you don't see the other side of it.
I know. I'm sure I have that myself too.
Everybody. Yeah.
I deal with some people where like they have a tendon pain and they try good rehab and it just still doesn't work. And it's like, I think you go in, see if something else is up. There could be other anterior knee pains.
And there's so many factors. Like you could do the perfect rehab program, but your diet is trash. Mm-hmm. You're not sleeping. Your rhythm is off.
So that's what it always is. If anyone comes and like, hey, this thing, I don't get that. I don't even think I've had that at all. But someone comes to me, your thing didn't work. It'd be like, all right, let's talk about what you did. And you're going to find 5 obvious things that you're like, you messed all this up. Yeah. And I think it's human nature. If I'm doing my own rehab, I'm not going to be aware of the 5 things I'm messing up. But if I have you look at my rehab, you're going to be like, dude, what is this? And I'll be like, oh, I never even saw it. I never thought of that.